WCCO 921. Susie Jones and me, John Hines, and we have heard about people objecting to H1N1 vaccinations for a variety of reasons, but there is a section of our culture in where we live that might have an altogether unthought of reason. Steve Murphy joins us from the newsroom.
Hi, John. Yes, there's a release from the Minnesota Medical Association. The headline is, "Physicians urge parents of all faiths to get the H1N1 vaccines." And the gist of the release is, and I'll read from it, Minnesota physicians are concerned that some parents may avoid the H1N1 vaccine when it becomes widely available because some versions contain a pork gelatin product. So we've invited on to the show Dr. Fatima Jiwa. She's a pediatrician. She is a Muslim, and she is the chair of the Minority and Cross-Cultural Affairs Committee of the MMA. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning.
Please tell us about this advisory.
Well, Muslims, by tradition and by their faith, avoid all porcine products, all pork products, and that's mostly in ingestion. That's where we hear about it the most. But there have been certain products that have been available in the past, so jellos and other things that have contained gelatin, where gelatin is actually obtained from a pig as a byproduct, and those things have also been avoided by a number of very religiously observant Muslims. And that is why we felt that when this came out as a concern, we heard it on the news one day, and we said, you know what, we need to make sure that our minority populations who have concerns about gelatin should know that the flu vaccine is something that is very highly recommended. It helps prevent death. We've had 7 deaths in the state of Minnesota so far this year from the novel H1N1 from the H1N1 virus. And, I mean, these are things that we would have hoped to have been able to avoid if we'd had the vaccine in time.
So, just to reiterate, you support getting the vaccine and think that the benefits outweigh and there really are not any concerns when it comes to going against a cultural tradition.
You know, part of that cultural tradition also includes the fact that if you are on a desert island and there is no other food available except for pork, you are allowed to eat that. It is not considered a sin at that point.
Because it is
no other option. Because it's life-saving and there is no other option.
And this is not just unique to our Muslim population, but also I would imagine that some very Orthodox Jewish members and Seventh-day Adventists as well. What kind of a proportion? Because when we think about having one of the largest Somali populations in urban America, it has to affect a good number of people.
It does, but also remember that everybody practices their faith a little differently. Some are very, very observant down to the complete letter of the law, and then there are others who are a little bit more flexible, where they may not eat pork, but they won't avoid everyday things in the United States like Jell-O. You know, so it is a little different. But there are, I mean, if they find out about it, or if they hear about it, they may actively go out of their way to avoid it, or think 3 times before actually eating it or getting the flu vaccine, which is why we thought if there is any concern out there about this, we also contacted the Islamic scholars to see, you know, what would you say about this, to make sure that it's not just us medically saying we need to have the flu vaccine to save lives. And they agreed. They agreed that if there is no other option, and right now there's such a limited amount of vaccine available that I would say there is no other option. Whatever vaccine is available, and if you can get it for the H1N1 virus, please go ahead and get it.
We're speaking with Dr. Fatima Jiwa. She's a pediatrician and she's with the MMA as well. Doctor, I know you have practice in, I think, 2 communities, Rogers and Brooklyn Center, is it?
That's correct.
And what about reaching out to the community in addition to this method through the press release from the MMA? Is there another way you're getting your message out?
Just to the general public, because right now we are completely overwhelmed in clinic.
With people wanting to get the vaccine and sick otherwise?
With people that are sick.
You're overwhelmed with sick kids. Are you? And you, again, just to reiterate, we don't know oftentimes when a child or an adult comes in with sick, doctor, whether or not they're not actually being tested for H1N1. They're just being treated for their symptoms?
Correct. And the reason why is because the rapid test that we have for influenza A does not pick up all the H1N1. It is not sensitive for H1N1 virus. So even if you do a rapid test, If it's positive, they have influenza A. It doesn't say what type. If it's negative, that does not mean that they do not have H1N1 infection.
But then again, as you have people come in from the community, you also have this opportunity then, while you're treating them, to share the message about the safety of the vaccine.
Absolutely. We've had, oh my gosh, we've been overwhelmed with phone calls from parents asking about H1N1. I wish we had more available so we could give it out more.
Is there a special concern for the minority community? We got a press release from the city of Minneapolis just the other day that said that Comcast Television, which has the Minneapolis Television Network and has special programming for such communities as Somalis, Hmong, Latinos, they're airing these H1N1 shows like 3 times a day to get the message out to the community. Is there a concern, whether it be language barrier, cultural barrier, that sort of thing?
That's always the case. I mean, we have such large healthcare disparities between different cultures. A lot of it is based on language, but then the other part of it is that if you do not have a culturally, I'll say humble, a culturally humble provider who makes the patients feel comfortable and have the patients trust them, they're not going to come back to you, they're not going to trust you, and they're not going to take the vaccines that you recommend. So this is actually a nationwide issue that we are working on, improving the cultural humility of all our healthcare providers.
So as you say, there's always been a cultural barrier there. Now you've got this issue of word spreading that there's a pork gelatin product in some of the H1N1 vaccine, and we're just down to a moment here, Doctor, but if there are folks in the community listening, what would be your message straightforward to them?
If you can avail of the vaccine, please go ahead and get it. It will save lives.
All right. Thank you for coming on with us. We appreciate it, Dr. Jiwa.
Thank you so much for having me.
Very good.